Really honored and grateful for this opportunity to be able to talk and to share with you. And I want to thank Reverend Michael. I sure appreciate that. So, I'm honored because like so many of you throughout the week, Rev Louie has been on my mind, like all of you. And like so many of you, I'm still processing everything that's going on. And at times it still seems surreal to me. So tomorrow we're going to celebrate Reverend Louie's life. We'll share the love, the joy, all of the laughter that he's brought to our lives, all those wonderful things. But today, though, I just want to share one thing that's, and I've told many of you already that, Maggie and I have been, like a lot of you, have been talking about Louie all week long, and in all of our discussions, it always ends up that we're either laughing or smiling, because you just can't, excuse me, you just can't think of Louie without going there. Because he always made us laugh. I mean, even when he was making a spiritual point when he was up here, he was making us laugh. We had just 2 weeks ago today that Louie gave his last talk here, and if you remember, for those of you who were here, he brought that big old laundry basket of shoes, and, which the point was, it was tied to all those things that no longer serve him, and he was going to get rid of all of those things. And his talk was funny, and it was lighthearted, and as always, it was very poignant. And one of the humorous things that came up in the discussion with Maggie and I was that very same thing about the shoes and bringing those up here. And our thoughts were always, what would Louie say about that? And he would say, well, at least he got rid of his old shoes. So goodness knows how we all love and we all miss him already. So when Reverend Michael called me earlier this week and asked me if I would do the talk, of course I said yes, but then we had to think about, well, what am I going to talk about? So I told him that I would sleep on it, and we both had the same thought. He said, well, ask Louie about it. And so I conferred with Louie, and he told me to go with what I know. And then through Maggie, he suggested, well, why don't you do something from your blog? And I have a spiritual website that's called sharingonemind.com. And so I decided, well, that's where we're going to go. We'll start with that. So what do you think about that, Louie? And Louie says, go for it. Yeah. Keith, can you turn that volume down just a little bit? It's bouncing back on me. Thank you. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go for it. I pulled up something, one of my writings, and we're going to kind of expand on that a little bit. And I know that Louie is right here with us, that brilliant speck of stardust, twinkling and smiling and cheering me and all the rest of you on. So here we go. So the title of this one piece that I wrote was called My Evolutionary Spiritual Voyage. Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson, some of you may know, he's a world-renowned physicist, astrophysicist, is the author, and he's a speaker, and he's on TV all the time, and he's the director of the Hayden Planetarium in New York, which is a fantastic place to go if you haven't been. And so right now, Dr. Tyson is working on the Cosmos TV series. It's a remake of Carl Sagan's old series, The Cosmos. So as he's working on this, they did the opening for all these graphics and everything, and it was something really spectacular because it's this spectacular zoom out from the little tiny planet Earth, and it comes into our planetary system, and then our galaxy, and then several galaxies, and then there's this depiction of our universe, and I mean, it is just really bold and spectacular. And Tyson says that after he showed that to some people, he said some people have seen it, and they say that this opening makes them feel small and insignificant in relationship to the world and to the universe. But Tyson says, oh no, you're looking at it all wrong. Instead of being insignificant, humans are incredible. We are, each of us, a speck of stardust from a collapsed star, and we survived the Big Bang in 13.8 billion years of evolution. And with the 8 pounds of gray matter that we have in our heads, we've been able to figure that out. So it's quite spectacular. Now Carl Sagan, who originally did the cosmos, he's written that the nitrogen in our DNA, the calcium in our teeth, the iron in our blood, the carbon in the apple pie, the apple pies that we eat, these were all made from the interior of collapsing stars. We're all made of star stuff. And Tyson adds that not only are we in the universe, but the universe is in us. I don't know of any deeper spiritual feeling than what that brings to me. And the amazing thing is Tyson is a very loud, self-professed atheist. So, and I will say that I know other atheists. It doesn't mean they're not spiritual. A lot of atheists are very, very spiritual. And so it's really remarkable. But the point us being that universe is within each one of us. And we know that from all of our studies and the teachings here. You know, Genesis 1:27 says, so God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. You know, my Catholic upbringing, we didn't get into the Bible very much. We didn't read the Bible. It wasn't one of those things that you do as a Catholic. It was always the priest who interpreted the Bible for us. God forbid that this common, ordinary mortal should read something and interpret it for himself. Yeah. So in grade school, we did get all of the basic little Bible stories, you know, David and Goliath, Moses and the Ten Commandments, and a lot of Jesus stories. And they all carried a very moral message, a moral lesson, you know, good and bad. Salvation, eternal damnation, all of those things. At church, Mass was usually a very short reading from the Old Testament, usually Isaiah, and then it was supported by a lesson from the New Testament, you know, and followed by a great damnation sermon. So what I was taught was, so what I came to learn and what I was taught from all of that is that, first of all, I'm separate from God. God has his favorites and I'm not one of them. We came into this world carrying the sins of our father, the original sin. I'm wicked. I need to sacrifice and repent to get into God's good graces. So as a child, this is pretty scary stuff because this is what the nuns were teaching me, right? And as I mentioned before, to this day, I just cannot imagine a 7-year-old who could so offend the great and powerful Oz, God, that he would be condemned to the fires of hell for eternity. That's one hell of a 7-year-old, I gotta tell you. So, anyway, oh, and let's not forget, God loves me no matter what. That's the message, kind of a mixed message, I'd say. So that's the way it was. So as I grew up, I turned away from all of this because I just knew that it couldn't be true for me. So after all, whoever created this stuff endowed God with all of these human attributes of fear and jealousy and pettiness and anger and all of those. I mean, the God of my youth was not any different than all of the Greek gods that had all of these incredible psychological problems and hang-ups. So I saw the universe as an incredible place full of magic and beauty and love. They, my religious teachers at the time, saw the universe as a place full of sinful temptation, evil, and horror. Now, how could a God create everyone, his children, then hurt and punish them on a whim? How could a God give them free will and then punish them for making the wrong choice? It just didn't make any sense to me. Sure, there are a lot of nasty and bad people in the world, but they're the exception rather than the rule. I suspect that there are those who live normal lives of quiet desperation, as Thoreau would say. But for the most part, I always thought that life was pretty good, and generally people are as happy as they want to be, or they choose to be. So on my own, off and on, I had moments of enlightenment, which I could clearly see that the world was more than all right. It was a great place to be in. Now those feelings were always kind of short-lived until I came upon science, religious science studies, and I started studying science of mind. So in my spiritual studies, I learned that God, source, divine intelligence, whatever you want to call it, created the universe in all that it is from itself. Whether you call it the Great Spirit, the Big Bang, the Big Kahuna, the Big God, it's just awesome. I mean, I am a manifestation of the Creator, and I am endowed with its qualities, all of its qualities. As its manifestation, God and I are inseparable. I learned too that the Spirit can only work through, in, and as me to create the experiences of my life. It never says no. It never says no to what I believe, what I truly believe. And I always manifest exactly what I truly believe. What a concept. So the huge evolutionary step in my life came during my practitioner training. Until then, I took all the classes and the workshops I could. I studied all of these things. I began to see more clearly what the sages of Holmes and Troward and Emerson and so many other people were saying. I had it down intellectually. I had many successes with treatment. Science of mind became part of my everyday life. In fact, I employed it personally. And when I was working, I even used it where I work, and people would come into my office for counsel and advice, and they would leave and say to me and compliment me on how brilliant I was, when all I did was paraphrase Holmes and Emerson. And they thought they were getting something. And they did get something, and they thought that I would give them something. So I knew that there was more for me to learn and to share. And that came further in my practitioner studies. You know, for those of you who don't know, we take the 100 and 200 series, but the 300 and 350 series of classes are completely different than the far more academic classes of the 100 and 200 level. Indeed, they're personal, experiential, they're soul-searching. And in those classes, I had to go within myself to see where I was coming from and how I was applying the science of mind principles in my life. I had to bare my soul, and I had to find out what was working and what was not. I had to know how I looked at life, what veils I had to peel away from my own eyes to see more clearly. What prejudices and hurts real or imagined I needed to deal with and heal in myself in order to be objective and to be able to assist others with treatment. After all, I'm really treating for myself to see the truth for others, and that's what it's all about. So there was actually a time midway through my training that I thought that I was not going to be able to do this. And it came about this way. In a class that we had, we were always working with principle and always taking things as a learning opportunity and to share. And so when one of us had a problem and we would bring it up in class, it was always a learning experience for everyone to deal with. So my teacher at that time was Rev Christine Jeffers, and she always used it as a practical application, everything that we did. So one night, one of the students had a very, very difficult problem. And she went through explaining everything that was going on, and by the time that she was done, we were all sitting there in tears. And, but Reverend Christine, at that time, she walked her through the entire process, walked her through the whole treatment process, and by the time we were done, it was kind of for lack of a better term, kind of a miracle moment. I mean, it was really something. So at the end of the class, I remember talking to Reverend Christine, and I said to her, you know, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. And she said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, it's very hard for me not to get involved and emotionally connected to the problems that people are telling me. And getting in there, and I know I've got to separate myself from that. So I said, I'm not sure that I could do what you just did. And so she said, well, you'll be able to do it. You just have to keep working on yourself. And as you continue to work on yourself, you'll come to know and see that the problems are truly just an appearance. And it's your job to see beyond that appearance to the truth of yourself and your client. And I have to say that was I gave that a lot of thought, and that was really my breakthrough moment. That was my epiphany. So today I'm happy to say that she was absolutely correct. I continued with my studies and working on myself, which I may say is still a work in progress. We're never ever finished. It never ends. I'm confident in my own skin, and to some degree I consider myself to be very successful as a religious science practitioner. But be that as it may, my work is far from over. Every day I'm striving to be my authentic self. You know, Ralph Waldo Emerson said that to be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. My evolutionary spiritual journey is far from over. So I would ask you, or some of you may be thinking, so why is this relevant to you? Well, it's relevant because my story is your story. We all come from that very same place. We are individual particles of that stardust from the same creation, which so far as we know took place 13.5 billion years ago. But where we are on our spiritual path, as we're moving along, we're all evolving, we're all learning. It's a constant thing that we are learning, and then whatever we overcome today, there is even more to keep opening up to us. Another way of seeing it. And for some of you who have taken 100, 200 classes, maybe more than once, you know that every time you go back and take a same class, it's a different person taking that class. You see something completely different because it's like like stepping into a stream of water. You know, you step in that water, you step out, and then when you step in again, it's a totally different stream of water. Everything has passed. And so all of the experiences that we have really color what's going on. So as these individual experiences, you know, and some of us, like Louie, are brighter and appear to move faster into other dimensions. In truth, though, we're all beings of light, we're all moving at the same speed. Our paths may appear to be different, but it's only because our paths are painted with colors of individual experiences. We continue to learn, we continue to evolve. Which brings me back to Rev Louie. You know, he lived a rich and full life. Like so many great teachers, he was ever the student. You know, a burning childlike curiosity, always wanting to see what was on the other side. You know, he brought humor to the science of mind, and he sparked our brain and our funny bone by making profound points more poignant and more palatable. He was a brilliant example for all of us to the very end. And when we are ready to move on to the next dimension, I hope that each of us will be as happy as Louie was when he lightheartedly said to Maggie some time ago, "I'm really happy and peaceful. I've done everything I ever wanted to do. My life is in a perfect place. If now is the time for me to go, I'm ready." You know, the poet Rumi said, "Don't grieve. Anything you lose comes around in another form." So there is no doubt that the very presence of Louie is right here with us today. And when you go out tonight, you look at the stars, and they are shining brighter tonight because Louie is right there, zipping around the cosmos, twinkling, laughing, and having a hell of a good time. And so it is. Thank you. So I think it's time for the offering. And